I'm Amy. Welcome to Mass Energized Communities meeting for November, and we're really excited to have you here talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and beyond, and how we can all work together to get this info out. So we have a couple of updates quick from Mass Energize, and we are going to spend a lot of time in discussion tonight, which I'm sure it still won't be enough time, but let's get it started. So I'll turn it over to Ellen.
Yeah, so it looks like we have about 29 folks. So reminder, Ellen Tone for Mass Energize, on the naming convention, the little 3 dots at the top of your Zoom square, or you can open yourself as a participant. Please rename yourself so we can know which community you're with. I can see Karen from Acton and Emily from Medfield, Martha nicely from Melrose. So all of you follow their leads. This is a good way for us to all get to know each other and who's there. So tonight we really have a 2-part agenda. The first part is Amy's done a really terrific job at distilling all of the provisions in the federal IRA legislation and as they would apply to residential single-family households for both home energy and for transportation, but we're focusing a little more on home energy and solar. And I've looked over the slides that Amy's done. Again, terrific job. This is the feeling you're going to have. Feeling you're going to have is, oh my gosh, I want to know all those things. We're going to send the slides out afterwards. Amy's going to talk about how we're going to translate that into template actions that you can upload to your site. So don't feel you have to take detailed notes. I mean, if it helps you ingest the information and you're that kind of person, I'm not preventing you. I am saying we're going to send the slides out and we're going to send up text putting these into actions that you can include on your site. So we're hoping to do that. I think, Amy, till about 7:45. I think I'll take about a half an hour, a few minutes more. And then what we'd really like to do is spend time after that in discussion, and we'll see how many people we have. 30, so we'll probably go into some breakouts, because I think the question on our minds is how we leverage these 2 competing dynamics of increases in energy prices, which you forecast somewhere between 30 and 60% on the electric side, and also on gas going up over the winter, with what you will see as enormously substantial incentives at the federal and state level to help folks do the actions we want, from home energy to solar to heat pumps for HVAC, heat pumps for hot water heaters, and EVs. So it's really like a messaging and program rollout, and we'd like to all brainstorm how we can do that individually and how we can maybe develop some messaging tools that we can share, social media posts, other things that we can develop as a community and share and do regional things. So as you're listening to Amy, I would encourage you to be thinking about, okay, how do I want to use this? How would this play? Because it's going to fall to us. There's a lot of good money and incentives out there that no one knows about yet. And we are the people who will know, along with others, and we've got to get the word out. Certainly starting January 1st, a lot of these kick into gear. So if you have questions along the way, put them in the chat. I'm going to monitor the chat. And if there's something, Amy, that I feel like we should stop to interrupt, like someone says, I don't understand that last point, we'll do that. Otherwise, kind of keep the questions in there, and it will also help us and Amy in how we might create some supplemental materials if things were confusing. I would also say that Amy's done a great job. We are not the experts in. Lots of people distilling the IRA. We're all going to continue to learn more. This is sort of the best of our understanding at this moment in time. So everybody with me on this stuff? Yep, good. All right, I'm going to, since Amy's computer took this night to choose to upgrade, she's on her phone, I'm going to share screen and be the slide advancer.
All right, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to be with us tonight. If you don't know me, I'm Amy Puelka. I am a volunteer with Mass Energize, and I am the community lead for Energize Framingham. Ellen set this up exactly what I wanted to say. I'm not an expert. This is a community conversation. These slides are meant to grow together. And I'll point out a couple places where we're looking for input from people who might know the answers to these questions. And as Ellen pointed out, we have a great moment in time. People are really aware of their energy bills, unfortunately, because their costs are going to be rising, but they're looking for answers. They've heard of the Inflation Reduction Act. Most people, that's about it. They've heard of it. There's something about EVs in there. They're going to be looking to us as people who care about the climate and environment to answer some of their questions. And by answering them, you don't have to know it all, but it's helpful to know where to point them in the right direction. Okay, next slide. Okay, as Ellen mentioned, we are focusing tonight on the Inflation Reduction Act for residents. There's lots of other great stuff in there for market prices, for contractors, et cetera. But we're really focusing on residential opportunities. And there's some things we know right now. We know that there are a ton of new clean energy opportunities and that the IRA will spur energy efficiency and clean energy in many states. So not every state is as lucky as Massachusetts to have fairly advanced energy efficiency programs. And even here in our states, our municipal light plants have a big range of programs available for their residents, depending on which specific plant. We also know that most of these incentives are going to take effect in 2023. So we have a little time still to learn and get caught up. And we also know that moderate and low income households qualify for additional incentives. So here's what we don't know. And this is a big category. We don't know how the Inflation Reduction Act, tax credits, and the Mass Save programs will interact. So whether you get your tax credit on the full amount of a project, a heat pump, for example, or you get it on the value after the Mass Save incentive. We also don't know how Mass Save might adjust their incentives in 2023, due in part to the IRA or other market forces. That typically happens at least once a year, as there's some adjustment of the incentives to keep moving things through the Mass Save program. We also don't know, and this is another big question, how state energy incentives will be delivered in Massachusetts. So there's a good chunk of money that will be coming to the states, going to the state energy offices, the Department of Energy Resources here. I have not heard, and if you've heard, I'd love to know, whether those incentives will be delivered directly to residents or provided to, I'm sorry for the dog, provided to, for example, Mass Save or the municipal light plants for distribution to their residents. Okay, the last thing we don't know is exactly which electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles will qualify. You'll see there's a lot of requirements. You probably heard Made in America requirements, battery material requirements, a lot of unknowns there. Okay, next slide. So here is something I observed, and I think it's a great trend about when does the money arrive if you're a resident. Previously, many programs, you have to wait for your money. So you do something, and then you get to claim a tax incentive or a tax credit, or you wait 90 days, 30 to 90 days for a rebate or for an incentive. I'm seeing more and more programs, including the Inflation Reduction Act, go to upfront discounts and point of sale rebates, which is a great trend in my opinion, because this reduces the upfront cost barrier that many of us fall into. You'll notice, go back one slide quick, Ellen. I mentioned this was a crowdsourcing presentation. Under tax credit, you see carryover year to year and no tax liability. So these are kind of questions in the Inflation Reduction Act that I have. So if you happen to know, for example, how many years you can carry over a tax credit, you can put that into the chat and we'll update our slides. So I would like to crowdsource some of this information, and I'll point out a couple of areas for opportunity. Okay, next slide. We looked at a lot of resources. We'll be providing those to you. And next slide. The best resource that we find was Rewiring America. And there is a savings calculator online that a resident can use to customize and see exactly what federal uh, incentives they'll get from the Inflation Reduction Act based on their income, where they live, etc. So it's a great, great tool. For the organizers, it's also got a couple great resources for helping understand the act at a policy level. So for example, on the right, there shows the HERA program, which is Ellen, you can see the notes, I'm forgetting, home and electrification. I'm
I
forgetting
actually can't see the notes, Amy, so in the way I'm doing it.
okay, so if someone remembers what HERA stands for, go back for a sec, Ellen.
Uh,
Please put it in the chat. I know, and I forget instantly every day. So anyways, that's for low income and moderate income folks. One other quick note on the Inflation Reduction Act, you see at the very bottom, 25C, that's a section of the act that refers to a 30% tax credit. It has a limit of $1,200 per year for a couple of measures exclusive of heat pumps. So that's something that we should be aware of, just that there's a cap. So Rewiring America is great for Inflation Reduction Act. It does not deal with Massachusetts at all, which is where we come in. Next slide.
I'd be curious also, and put it in the chat. I've used the Rewiring America. I know, Steve, you feel like it may not, as things evolve, it's going to have to stay up to date. It's incredibly helpful because you can put in your income as an individual. We've been promoting it in our actions in Wayland and for JCAN. So put in the chat if you've had any experiences with that, that'd be helpful.
Yep. So like I said, here's where we come in. We being not only Mass Energized, but all of us as Mass Energized communities and helpful folks for our communities. Right now, Mass Energized has created a comprehensive table that includes both the Inflation Reduction Act and current Mass Save or other state incentives. This is current as of basically the end of October, and so it will need to be a living document, but we're able to provide that and share that and have people contribute to it. As Ellen said, we're also going to provide language to update our Mass Energized platform actions. All this being said, you have resources, emphasizing again, you don't need to know all the answers, but it's helpful to know where to look. And finally, we have this wonderful network of communities right here on the call to share our resources and outreach efforts. So we've established a new Slack channel. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And we also have our Mass E community Google group where folks can email one another. Next slide. This is the Slack channel, IRA and math programs in the Mass Energized community Slack portal. What I really like about Slack is it cuts down on my email. That is one key thing. It also segregates conversations for me into topic specific areas. And I can see what other people are writing about without having to remember to include all the key people on a particular group email. So that's what I like about Slack. And we hope to see you there. Next slide.
And we'll do some open office hours if people have interest that we can help people who are not good at Slack see it. So for example, we'll post a link to these slides also in that Slack channel that you can get. So over to you, Amy.
Great. So this slide is mostly largely showing you the structure. I'm going to present the incentives in the table structure. So you can see the left column is the action, then it followed by federal incentives, and that will convert to the IRA in 2023. This is current 2022, and then followed by the Mass Save incentive or other statewide, other state programs, such as the More EV program for electric vehicles. And finally, the heat loan, which is an offering from Mass Save, where a customer can take a loan anywhere from $500 to $25,000 at 0% interest for 7 years. Okay, next slide. So let's look at 2023. Here's where the Inflation Reduction Act incentives come into play. There's a 30% tax credit on insulation, windows, and doors. They all have specific or limits per year for the measure, as well as a total overall cap of $1,200. Mass Save 2022 incentives, let's just look at insulation, is discounted at 75 to 100% covered by Mass Save for homeowners. It is covered at 100% for renters and landlords of 1 to 4 unit buildings. So I will tell you, Energize Framingham puts out a monthly newsletter, and we ran an article to summarize the IRA to our readers. And what we told our readers is that there's no reason to wait for 2023 for these 30% tax credits. Do your insulation now as soon as you can to help with your heating costs, and Mass Save incentives are great. Again, big question, are these going to change in 2023? It's likely, and that's why they're indicated in italics.
Amy,
All right.
quick question from Karen was, did the 2020 incentives have a cap of 1,200 for the tax credits at the federal level? Do you know?
The
slide before, really.
The 2022 tax credits, I don't know what their cap is. I didn't do
we
that.
didn't do a deep dive because we mostly were looking forward, Karen, but good question. We can try to endeavor to find out. Okay.
Amy, why are you saying that the Mass Save incentives are likely to change in 2023?
So it's a big caveat. We don't know what's going to happen. In my experience, the incentives do tend to adjust year to year. There's big adjustments between different 3-year plans. The small adjustments tend to happen year to year.
Yeah, so I guess my experience so far, you have far more experience or many more years, but is the Mass Save goes year to year, but they're in the midst of this 3-year plan, and the indications I've heard, if anything, that some of the incentives will get a little more generous, that and particularly these insulation and air sealing are not likely to get less generous, in my opinion.
And that would be fantastic. I love that, Steve. Thank you for contributing that, because it is uncertain. Some of us talk more than others to different people in the programs, and that's what this community is all about. I'm going off my own historical personal knowledge. You've probably been talking to people this actual year, but I just provide the caveat because there are still a lot of unknowns. All right. So we've been talking about market rate. The Inflation Reduction Act has enhanced incentives, as does the Mass Save program, for low and moderate incomes, which are a percentage of the area median income. If you're like me and kind of know what that means, but not exactly, this table was helpful because it puts numbers to it. So the less than 80% AMI is the low income, also known as income eligible program. And the most right column is the 80 to 150% AMI, known as moderate income in the IRA, or the enhanced residential program for Mass Save. Another useful thing is to know whether if someone thinks they may qualify or are curious about seeing whether they might have enhanced incentives, this is a good kind of resource where you can just show them this information and they can make their self-determination whether they qualify or not, and then follow through with the official qualifications. Okay, next slide.
Does anyone, can I ask you a question, quick question? Does anyone know whether that's after tax income or before tax income?
Area median income. I think I can't answer that for sure.
All right, I'll Google it. I'll put it in the chat if I find out. Thank you.
Wonderful. So this slide is weatherization for low and moderate income. And the main purpose of this slide I wanted to show is that the Inflation Reduction Act, rather than a 30% tax credit at market rate for insulation, now we're receiving a 50% upfront rebate or 100% rebate for low and moderate and low income. They do have caps, but it's a much more generous incentives than market rate. I also just wanted to point out that Mass Save has a barrier mitigation program in particular for low and moderate income, for knob and tube mitigation or vermiculite removal up to $7,000. So that's a big jump. Okay, next slide.
Let me just point out that in the income eligible weatherization program, often we see about 30% of homes not being able to move forward because of the existing health and safety concerns. So this Mass Save offering, which they told us about, we had a briefing a few months ago, is really significant here. And it's for both low and moderate income. So this is a lot more people can kind of get across the finish line. That's pretty amazing.
Great comment, Ellen. That's what makes this community fun. Anyways, let's get into solar and batteries. So solar is fun. We have now assured 30% tax credit for solar all the way until 2032. Also for battery storage. The great thing about solar for me was my friends who installed solar in May were all sad that they weren't going to get the 30% tax credit, but it is actually retroactive to January 1st of this year. So you can bring good news to anyone that you know installed solar this year. For solar, there's also a Massachusetts tax credit, and you can enroll in the SMART program. It does not qualify for a heat loan. For the battery storage, I mentioned the 30% IRA tax credit. And Eversource and National Grid are both offering programs to for peak demand mitigation where they can use the resources in your battery. You also can upgrade your electric panel and take that 30% tax credit if you're doing that along with solar. That's a pretty good opportunity. You see the question marks, state programs for electric panel. That's because I didn't find anything. If someone knows about it, it'd be a great piece of information to add to the presentation and the information for people. Okay, next slide. Heat pumps, we're talking market rate still. That 30% tax credit is showing up for your ground source heat pumps, your heat pump water heater up to $2,000, and your electric panel upgrade up to $600. For air source heat pumps, there is a $2,000 per year limit. Mass Save incentives right now are very generous for heat pumps. There are $15,000 for a whole home ground source heat pump system and $10,000 for air source heat pump. And then you also see the discounts for partial and the Mass Save discount, instant discount. So again, avoiding that upfront cost for heat pump water heaters. Next slide. And those incentives jump in the Mass Save program for the moderate and low income folks. It's the 30% tax credit for ground source heat pumps. I'm questioning my data there. I'll have to look back at that. But for Mass Save, you can get $30,000 for a whole home conversion, only if you do not have natural gas as your heating source. That is the current program structure. And you can see also for air source heat pumps.
Can you just say that? Can you just explain that? So
yep.
That's confusing.
So Massachusetts homes typically are heated by natural gas, oil, or propane are our top three heating sources. The Mass Save programs serve customers with any of those fuels, but this particular incentive, specifically for low and moderate income customers, has these larger incentives if you convert an oil or propane heated home to a ground source heat pump or an air source heat pump.
Got it. Thank
you. Okay. Then we go through, again, electric panel upgrade, electric wiring, and heat pump water heaters. Okay, next slide. Again, like I said, we're going through things fast because I'm not an expert. You guys we're crowdsourcing the expertise here. I'm seeing on the chat a couple of great comments coming in, corrections. It's all good. Thank you. Moving on to electric vehicles. You see the fonts getting smaller. There's a lot more.
Amy, just let me ask one question before we go to cars, because this is one question. She said, actually depressing, if I understand the cap properly, which I'm not sure she does. So if we installed solar for 20,000 and we are eligible for 30% tax credit, that's 6,000. Yes. but the cap is 1,200. So we're actually not getting anywhere near the 30%. I thought solar was its own thing and didn't apply to the cap.
Own thing. That 1,200 cap applies to weatherization, including an energy audit, insulation, air sealing, and there's one other
Maybe
kind of
heat pump hot water heaters. I don't know.
no, heat pumps are excluded. That's one cool thing. Above that, and there's one other small thing that
But the gist of it, the answer is no, Karen. Solar is separate, doesn't apply to the cap.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So back to vehicles, it gets more complicated. There's those made in America standards. There's those battery material requirements. Right now, the best thing we can do is go to specific websites and look at models of cars. It even goes so far as having websites where you look up the VIN numbers. So this is getting really, really detailed. I think it's going to take a little time. Probably you all agree for this market to really evolve. But for the cool thing is that that the incentives are stimulating the market and getting people's attention. So in 2023, there's new federal tax credits for up to $7,500 for certain new electric vehicles. They have maximum MSRP values for passenger or larger vehicles. But also for the first time, there is that 30% tax credit up to $4,000 for used EVs, which is a game changer for a lot of people. These are limited by income limits, as you see in the caps column. Now, in Massachusetts, we have the Inflation Reduction Act incentives coming. We also have the More EV State program, which provides incentives for electric vehicles. Right now, they're running about $1,500 to $2,500 for rebates. The recently passed Massachusetts climate legislation increases the amount of those incentives to $3,500 or $1,500 for a new plug-in hybrid. So these will be able to mix and match with the federal tax credits. The other really interesting thing is these rebates are being converted to point of sale, as I mentioned, so it's reducing that upfront cost of a vehicle. That program isn't in play yet, so the start date is to be determined. If someone has intel on that, that would be great to know. So those are both Massachusetts and federal legislation have some exciting new opportunities for electric vehicles. Just quick mention, there's also a More EV Trucks program there that you can look at. Okay. 2024, a little more certainty in that the Inflation Reduction Act incentives also convert to point of sale incentives, which is, again, reducing that cost barrier. The More EV State rebates are continuing as a point of sale incentive. Again, income limits apply. And next slide. For the low income folks, these are the vehicle incentives are the same, but you also have the opportunity to have a 30% tax credit up to $1,000 to install an electric vehicle charger at your home. This only applies for residents and households in low income or rural communities. So we'll have to, I'm looking for a good resource for that, for a list of where those communities are. If someone knows of it, that would be helpful to share. All right, next slide. Going to appliances.
One sec, Amy, I just want to answer Debbie's question. Can we create some kind of decision tree, yes, no, to walk people through the information? Debbie, the Rewiring America site is fantastic and does just that. It tells you what you're eligible for based on what your interests are and your income. So I think that tool is probably better than what we would create. Don't you think, Amy?
Yes, I agree. And actually, it's a great question because I had mentioned that we told Energized Framingham readers not to wait on insulation. We did tell them to wait on electric vehicles. And I meant to say that. I said, wait until at least 2023. wasn't such a hard ask anyways, because it's hard to find any electric vehicles on the car lots recently. So that helps. Appliances are pretty quick. Inflation Reduction Act, the incentives are limited to low and moderate income for appliances. Mass Save does have incentives for certain appliances. I just put them there for completeness. Next slide. So those appliance incentives to the IRA are for electrification. This is really driving electrification. So they're looking at if you replace a gas dryer with a heat pump clothes dryer for moderate and low income, you get a 50% or 100% discount up to $840. And that again is that upfront discount. So there's not money being put out and waited for to be returned. The replacing a gas stove, similar incentives. The key criteria here is that you cannot replace an electric stove with an electric resistance or induction stove. You must be replacing a gas stove with either an electric resistance or an induction stove. And then there's some other appliances that current programs are able to provide to low-income folks if they have a currently inefficient appliance, clothes washers, dehumidifiers, refrigerator. And the other thing is, sorry, go ahead, next slide.
I mean, there's just a question, do the caps only apply to federal or state programs? And the caps are for the tax, the incentives at the federal level, I believe, Amy, right?
Yes.
25C, yeah.
Okay, this is kind of a catch-all, but is helpful for some folks. Energy audits, you can get a 30% tax credit up to $150 per year. Some people want a really deep energy audit. This might be a good opportunity for them to recoup a little of those costs if they go, if they're financing that audit themselves. Whole home retrofits, if someone's doing a deep energy retrofit, you can get up to $4,000 or 50% of project costs. This is going to be, I read, most useful for homes with electric resistance heating or high income households. So limited case. And finally, just mention that new construction has very generous incentives for all electric new construction from the Mass Save program. Okay, next slide. So information overload. What do we do with all this information? We are going to update Mass Energize actions. So we'll be providing that the action updates for all of you. And hopefully we'll keep updating them as we learn from all of you and continue sharing. All right, next slide. All right, and this is it, sharing with other communities. So I've been mentioning, you know, we are a network of communities working together to support one another as folks that people turn to with knowledge about energy efficiency, about climate action. I am happy to share that Energize Framingham newsletter article I've referred to. Another example is Green Newton's provided a list of all the electric vehicles on sale here in the market. So that's helpful. All these types of materials that anyone is able to develop, if we share them, they're you know, put to great use. Another thing I'm hoping that we can do, and we all have been doing this somewhat already, is to multiply our effort by leveraging communication and outreach efforts from other Mass Energized communities. Again, from Framingham, I want to let folks know that the City Sustainability Committee has partnered with the public library to present a couple of hybrid in-person and on YouTube live sessions, one on heat pumps in January and one on EVs in February. So I'm happy to share those events with everyone here and have your folks attend. I do borrow from other communities, your events, and send folks there. So hopefully we can just keep sharing those resources. And finally, this is a nod to all of us who work with residents, but also many of us care about our municipal operations and municipal opportunities. And so this American Cities Climate Challenge Fold tool is a good resource for looking up the opportunities at the municipal level. And that is it. I thank you for your time.
All right. Martha notes, and we agree, the Green Energy Consumer Drive Green program is really the best resources for up-to-date info on EV incentives. So absolutely. All right. So I know you weren't going to remember it all, but the overwhelming reaction, I think, is there's a lot of new federal resources available, and we've got to figure out how to get that word out. So as Amy said, we'll be sending some text to you that you can plunk into your actions. But I think we wanted to talk about more than just that. Like, how are there things that we can do as a collective community to come up with strategies to communicate this to people? You know, we all hold events a lot, and maybe we can do some joint events. Let me just say, we did an event on heat pumps for Energize Wayland that a bunch of you co-promoted. And I think we had 49 people attending from a bunch of different communities. So we know that works, Amy. So one thing I would suggest to you is to, if in the chat, if people want to copy Amy's event to their platform, you just put it in the chat and Amy will copy the event to your site, and then you guys will have it automatically listed on your site. So just let us know how to do that. So I think at this point, we wanted to get some feedback. Do people want to talk? We have like a lot of people, 35 people. We could break up into 3 breakout rooms and just groups of 10 and kind of talk about strategies on getting the message out. Or we could break up into, if some people just want to dive deep with Amy on the nuts and bolts, we can make a group for that, and others can talk more about how to use this information and help us run campaigns locally. And also, what is it that you think we could maybe do collectively? Should we come up with some one pagers? Should we come up with social media postings? Should we do some collective events? I think we're looking for people's input about how we can help each other get the word out. So I guess first question is, are there people who just want to talk about the nuts and bolts with Amy and they could go into a breakout? Anybody who wants to do that, give me a, I don't know, thumbs up. Otherwise, we can talk more about getting the word out. I don't see any there. So I think most people want to talk about getting the word out. Is that true? Yes, I need some visual. Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for giving me something here. Okay. Could we try it as a whole group, or is that wackadoodle with 33 people? So I'm interested, what can, are people is anybody planning on doing some public campaigns leveraging this sort of duality, increasing prices and increasing money? Karen.
So we have a group in Acton called Housing and Climate Justice for Acton, which is an outgrowth of climate mobilization. And Energize and their acronym HCJA, we're talking about trying to help the people who are going to get this energy bill shock. We have Eversource for electricity, so it'll be coming in the new year with them. And I think we've decided we're going to try to do some tabling, some canvassing at multifamily buildings in town. We're going to try to have an event and an event with lots of resource tables and kind of do the service thing of helping people find ways to cope with the coming costs. And then on the other side, really try to promote for homeowners especially, but also for renters, but especially for homeowners, all the incentives that are now available. And then for renters, really stress the getting Mass Save to at least come in and do assessments in their apartments. And then, hopefully we can create more more incentives for the management companies to do something. So
I guess if any other communities have larger renter populations, maybe that would be good to be in touch with Acton about that and what they're doing. Is anybody else thinking a lot on the outreach targeting renters? Anybody else? focusing in that space? Okay. All right. Anybody else planning on doing something or want to spur discussion about what we could maybe do collectively to make it easier for all of us to, I think most people don't know this level of detail. There's just a lot of money on the table here. Thoughts?
So, yeah, so this is Joanne from Newburyport. The template is important. So if you can update the template, we're good to go. That's all we need right now. With TBD, like there's some things, many things. So I found this a fire hose. This was a fire hose on me. And so there's a lot of TBD and we're okay with that. But when you do the update on the template, this is solid. This is TBD because we don't know the tax credit because of IRS. I just need that information and we'll get it out. I mean, we don't even have that right now. So that would be great. And then the other thing is that we're really focused on small business here in Newburyport because we're net zero, by whatever, 2050. So what are we doing for small business? Is that a whole separate IRA? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we did our first cut at this because you can see it was already like an enormous bite at the apple, Joe, as you've said. So we haven't done that other bite yet because we've kind of been focusing in this space. So we'll definitely send out this table. We would love to do it in a version. We'll version it, but we also will give you links to like a Google slide presentation. And I think, Amy, we can do something where we highlight a cell if it. Amy and I will think about ways to show you where things are changing. So we'll get an alert that something changes and kind of point it out to you. So I'm curious about other people. Are there ways this information would be more helpful to you? Are there things that I know I'm thinking about something in Wayland, but I want to hear from other people, but are there ways you want to explore how to get this information out? I just want to know what people are thinking.
I can say from Elders Climate Action Massachusetts is planning on doing a series of workshops on this, virtual workshops that would be available to anybody who's interested. We're open to having people collaborate on that, planning to put together over the next month or so. Green Consumer Alliance obviously has done a lot of work in this space. You probably are fairly familiar with that. We just had a presentation at our last meeting with them, and they seem to be really well tuned in and are prepared to provide workshops on this. My feeling is that's the beginning of the process. For some people, that will be enough. For many others, I think it's clear they're going to need a coach to take this and really walk them through it. So that's kind of the next piece that we're going to be working on, is to figure out how do we get these coaches together? How do we get them trained to take on the folks who say, yeah, I'm interested, but this is really complicated. Tell me where to go next. It's really challenging. It's not a simple question when people choose to go to heat pumps. It's not given that they're going to save any money on their energy bill. So, I mean, that's important to put out there, but that's what we're looking for, is folks who are at least willing to, step up and do this for the sake of the environment in part. So it's complicated, and we need that kind of help as well.
So Roger, one thing I think I will ask is, you can work with Amy and Nathan, our executive director, and me. If you have events, we can certainly blast those out to our communities. Right. And what we can do is create an event, a standard event in our software that can easily be duplicated for all these other communities. So you can work with us if you're open to having those events, have a lot more people attend. So would people find that useful if we create an event for some of these Elders in Climate Action and then we allow you to duplicate it to your sites? Can I get some thumbs up, downs? Francie, all right. There's enough thumbs up that we can do that, I think, Nathan.
Okay, that's good to hear. That's great. And we'll get back to you and be in touch on that. Thanks very much.
Okay. Great. I mean, coaching has come up before. I know a lot of communities are standing up more and more coaches. So I think one thing we might want to think about is how to make this information digestible for coaches. Because there are actions, and then there's all these tables that Amy put together. So I think we maybe it's like the cheat sheet for coaches. It's actually hard to remember all this stuff in your head. If you're just doing heat pumps, Steve, probably you can remember just the heat pump incentives, right? But if you're trying to work through somebody with a lot of things, I'm wondering, Steve does a lot of coaching and others do coaching. Is there something you think we can, the Rewiring America is great. Is there some other tool? Who else is doing coaching, and what do you think we could collectively put together in addition to the action write-ups and these spreadsheets, tables? Is there something else that you think would be helpful? I'll just call on Steve first.
Well, I mean, I think the tables in Amy's slides are good as you need, because, even the mass save incentives, there are all sorts of conditions around them that are quite complex, and the ultimate source is the mass save website. So I think these tables are fine.
All right. Kat wants to jump in. I can't see all the hands, so people have to help me, Nathan, if you see other hands. But Kat, I see next.
Yeah, just as a solo coach in Wayland, I also think we have enough information, because most people come to the incentive through a particular thing they want to do. They don't come through these tables, right? They're like, I'm interested in solar. The solar coach talks to them, tells them about the incentives. The installer, of course, does as well. So there's a nice check on that as well. And then as solo coaches, we can sort of maybe this is something that is handy. Maybe some sort of write-up whereby a particular actions coach can sort of open the window to, there's so many other incentives for other actions as well, if they see that particular homeowner or renter is interested. So maybe some sort of elevator speech for doing more stuff because of these incentives that might actually be helpful.
Okay. I'm curious if people are thinking about how they might, so events I'm hearing, and I'm hearing coaches. Rick. You have to unmute.
Yes, just a thought, which is making anything timely, like with electric vehicles. For instance, something that gets the word out to people that if you're thinking of this, you're on the cusp of thinking about this, you might want to, here's a reason you might want to wait until 2023 to pull the trigger and, and buy it, or in some cases lease it. If the incentive increases, as I think I heard you say it does, timely information is much more, in my opinion, is much more likely to motivate somebody who's been sitting on the fence for doing something. And I think that's the sort of I think there's a lot of that low hanging fruit out there, and but getting it to act, and act relatively quickly is the key. Otherwise, the fire hose or the, I think also the sheer breadth of it keeps amazing me, is that they've really, gone into things that are, I've been thinking about, but didn't really expect anybody to think about, like dryers, heat pump dryers and heat pump water heaters and all that. I mean, I don't know how you communicate that. I think it was Roger speaking earlier. There's a lot of stuff out there. That's it.
Okay. One thing that I'm taking away from that is, and if people do write little snippets for like their newsletter, I know Amy did one on the IRA. We just did one on heat pump hot water heaters in Wayland, just through the Slack channel, sharing that and the Google groups. So if you're writing a newsletter text, you might see some inspiration, particularly on these time sensitive things. I'm going to go to Ellen, and then Roger, do you have your hand up again, or is that a legacy hand?
No, still up.
Okay. And the Ellen from Harvard.
Hi, sorry, my face isn't here. Usual internet. One thing I think that I'm thinking about is that there are a lot of people doing, these webinars or these events online in Zoom, and they're at all different times and places. And I think in some ways it's good just to have them all and know that, because everybody's schedules are so tight, that I think I would put out, want to learn about heat pumps. Here's the 15 different, one in here's one in November, December, January, whatever, and just put that all out there so that maybe people will at least try to tune into something. I mean, I guess that's one thing I'm thinking, not just one at a time, but if we knew about them all, not just our group, but even like the green, whatever those group is that we just talked about.
Gecko, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be helpful to us in our newsletter, saying, okay, you want to hear about heat pumps? Here's, here's all these places you can go and learn something. Besides the fact that we already have, an old one on our website that we did a while ago that was, recorded. But sometimes I think the recorded doesn't get the attention because people want to ask questions and they can't, right? So I'd rather they go to something that's live and keep going. So that, I would think that might be helpful, at least perspective from Harvard.
Yeah, I'm just on that point. I'd be curious. It's something we could try to do, which is to ask you all sort of monthly to give us we could see your events on the platform. So that one thing you can do, but if you you could send them to Nathan and we could once a month just send out a little blast. Here's what we know is coming up in the next month. Can I just get a reaction to that? Everybody know their reaction things. Can I get some thumbs up, thumbs down, please? Okay, enough thumbs up that I think it might be worth trying.
And I would add that Harvard's not using the event part of Mass Energize because we have it connected to our webpage that has events in a separate place. So we haven't actually done that. So that, to me, maybe we have to figure out ourselves how we're going to tap into that.
Okay, but we could try and do that. We'll need you guys, right? Because we're going to search the normal suspects, but you got to tell it this will be better if everyone feeds information. And I think Nathan, maybe we should use you as the point of contact. So we'll make that an action item. Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Somebody else had their hand up. Roger.
Just quickly, I think this question of coaching deserves a little more attention and thought. I'm not sure I have an answer to this. I've been a heat pump coach in Natick through our recent campaign. And heat pumps can get extremely technical on the one hand. On the other hand, I think the information that people need most to take the first step is a little bit different. And I think with that, heat pumps might be combined with some appliances and some other things. I think it would be good for folks to give some thought kind of globally to how to recruit coaches, what kind of training you need for different levels of coaching, and to kind of offer that to get some more folks ready to really sort of pick up and follow up on people who show some initial interest and really kind of engage them to see if they can take the next steps. And I don't have an answer about how to do that. I'm just throwing it out there as an idea.
We've had a group of people working on coaching, and we've kind of thought about a little subgroup that could kind of meet on that. A bunch of communities are working with Abode that is offering heat pump coaching training. Heat Smart Alliance is a tremendous resource. Right. Brad, Steve, Bubzog, others are involved in that. And I know in Wayland, we're doing a training for coaches who are helping on just home energy audits and working with an HPC vendor. And we'll try and come up with some materials. So are other people interested in this question of and in Wayland, we have like Cat's our solar coach, and we have an EV coach, we have heat pump coach that Steve trained, and others, and coaches on eco landscaping. Are people interested in seeing materials for coaches, or talking about how you recruit them and how you train them and how you keep them sustained? Does that continue to be an interest for us, or is that just a small set of people? I'm interested. Can I get some, I don't know, any communities that are also interested in that, or not so much? Mary says yes. Can I need the electronic things. I just can't see people's hands. So that looks like Lexington, Wayland, Sherborne. Amy had her hand up at one point. Okay, Eco Natick, Medfield. I'm taking your notes. Jake Can, Harvard. Okay, there's enough there that we need to think about that and a way to share what we're all doing. Or maybe if we're doing a little training on energy coaches in Wayland, we could think about opening that up to other people as well. Okay, Amy has her hand up, I think.
Yep, I do. Just thinking about combining a couple of comments, which is, we were talking about sharing events across communities and how nothing fits everyone's schedules. And then I'm thinking about applying that concept to coaches, where I may be able to recruit 1 or 2 coaches, but having the scheduling is challenging. I didn't know if like coaches, if we were as a group of Mass Energized communities able to collect like 30 coaches cumulatively or something, we could create a common calendar or shared resource there. I don't know if that's feasible or not, but that's kind of been a barrier for me, is the investment needed to recruit and train just a couple coaches is maybe not worth the effort at this point in time, for my own community. But if there are other communities also doing it and we get this network that's provided, like the Heat Smart Alliance has done, for example, or you were saying Abode, where it's a network of coaches, that seems a lot more feasible. I don't know if that's making a lot of sense. I guess I'm just anticipating with the increased energy bills, a lot of interest. If we frame it as you want to reduce your energy bill, then they need to have someone to talk to. And it's going to be, minimum 10 minutes a call, for example. I'm just kind of.
So I see, good question. So I see Rick, I see Mary, I see Martha. Before I go to those 3, I just love some reactions to what Amy said. That could be put in the chat if you want, so we can just see people's thoughts about it. I know I'm feeling some complexity around it myself, and some sort of like, oh, if I've trained them, I'm not sure I want to lend them out to somebody else, because I feel like there's plenty of demand here, so which doesn't feel very neighborly. But I'd be curious what other people think. But let me then go, actually, I'm going to go to people who have not spoken. So go Mary, Martha, but I think it was Ridley from Ego Naked who had his hand, their hand up first. So let me go Brindley, Mary, Martha. Ooh, sounds like a poem.
Hi guys. Brinley, I am new to Econatic. So my interest is, when you were talking earlier, you were talking about Facebook and reach out, and I'm kept raising and lowering my hand because I didn't want to interrupt where we were talking about coaches. But my interests are social media and figuring out how to actually reach the people. I think the coaches are really important. I think all of that is important. But my interests are, have we made a chain of command, meaning have we reached out to high school energy clubs? Have we reached out to local designers in towns? And do we have a flow chart for how to do that kind of thing? So once we've created these pages, we have people to send them to that are actually talking to the individuals in our towns.
So we have a tool that's up on our website, which is an outreach planner, which allows communities to kind of inventory local groups in their community, and then how you can run a campaign and send things out to them. So that might be something I know Debbie's worked with that on that. One of the things I do think we could do better on is maybe coming up with some common social media kind of postings that people can tweak in Canva. We're in the midst of using a Mass Energized intern in Wayland. We're doing a big outreach on energy audits and upgrades with All in Energy and one of the HPC vendors. And we will be developing a playbook out of what we're doing. Shearborn, I think, will follow us. We have an MOU with All in Energy and Wayland, but we're just have a 5-week social media campaign with good graphics and different messages each of the 5 weeks. Wayland's in the post, but you could strip Wayland out. Like you could, you could make it work for Lexington, Mary, very easily, taking what we've done. So just a thought is, people, I think as we're doing things, if we could be neighborly about it and try to do things in ways that can then another community could use and customize for them. So I think that's something we could work on, really helping. If you're doing something, talk to us and let's see how we can do it with you so it can then be shared with somebody else. All right, Mary, Martha.
Okay, so this concept of coaching is just really, I think, very powerful. The idea to have somebody to turn to and ask your questions. We're in Lexington training people to be heat pump coaches. We've been energized. Lex Can's been tossing this idea around about is it pie in the sky to try to create sustainability coaches, somebody who, so that we're not having all these individual people. Can people be trained to be like resources, like so that they can help people with heat pumps, or help them with IRA, or help them with a whole variety of questions. I don't know if that concept is less accessible than into people specially trained, but it's something we're just starting to toss around in Lexington, if that can even be done. So as you think about your coaching, what you might come up with you mentioned about some coaching ideas. I just wanted to throw that out for what it's worth.
And people could maybe put some reactions to that in the chat. I will say, Mary, in Wayland, we've got these specialty coaches, and then we've also identified the need for somebody who's sort of like the general, like for the person who says, I don't know where to start, right? Okay. So we've got the generalist, sort of the decarbonization person. I think it's actually me. So it's like, if they don't know where to start, you could talk to Ellen first, and there'll be a few questions. So that may be that but we'll see what we get in terms of uptake. I'd love to see in the chat whether the people are thinking about that. And, I'm also just having this weird idea, which is, and Newton's done a ton on coaching, and they have a town staff person on this in addition to their volunteers who coordinates a lot of volunteers. So there's a lot to learn from Newton, I think, on this, but, it's also possible if we could raise, with money, we could also employ more, we could employ coaches at Mass Energize. We haven't thought about doing that, but it would be something that could be thought about. So, Martha.
All right, I'll try to keep this brief. It looks like I'm one of the few municipal participants in this meeting tonight, and I'm trying to soak up as much as I can about the IRA. And Amy, hats off to you on deciphering what all the information. I just cannot get my head around what's coming at us in 2023. But I totally appreciate all of the volunteers here. And I think that, the volunteers with the municipal sustainability managers, we're together, we can make this work. But I also have this, we cannot get to 1 million heat pumps, 1 million by 2030 on the backs of volunteers. So hopefully under the Healy administration, we'll get some funding, we'll get a program, we'll get some things happening to make this. We can't do this in this way. This is kind of ridiculous if you think about it, how we're trying to make this all work with volunteers. That said, I think that there is a role for Mass Energize, and I had a meeting with Nathan this week to try to figure out this deploying coaches, because all of us have coaches in our communities. We're training coaches, we're deploying coaches, we rely on volunteer coaches, but the thing that stops us in our tracks is how do we schedule them? How do we pair up coaches with their available time with the residents? How do we do this? And I know that a number of communities are struggling with this, even those who are working with Abode, which Melrose is one of those communities. So I think there's a role for Mass Energized, because you guys have figured out the software and the back, the programming. And I think that there could be a role for Mass Energized to figure out a way to perhaps seamlessly pair up residents with volunteer coaches as we wait for the state and the Healy administration to figure out how to do this without unpaid volunteers. But that needs to happen, because this is, just that presentation from Amy was just unbelievable. It was just too much information. There's no way that all of us or any of us can master all of these incentives and all of this information and figure out how the best way to get to our residents and help them navigate the system to get them to where we want them to go. So that's just my.
I think, Martha, one thing
as a
that would be,
municipal person who's in this all day, every day. This is early stages. We need to ramp this up in a big way.
Thank you for the comment, Martha, and I think one thing that we should follow up with you on, like, as you know, you, Jillian, are some of my favorite sustainability managers, like really thinking about how we can support, fund, and sustain an ecosystem that allows hockey stick adoption. I think what we can do in Mass Energize and these volunteers and all these communities is because we're nimble, we're a very good experimentation lab, as opposed to the way the state has to roll things out, which is nimble would not be the first word I would use. So I think we could really benefit. Let's follow up on how to do that. And I think the voices of people like you talking to the state saying, hey, there's a role for these guys to help us try some things and experiment and learn so that we can really fund and support a model. But we're never going to hit these state goals, Martha, right? Unless we can activate the residential sector. That's the truth of it. So I think it's a super good comment, and we're really interested in being in a niche that accelerates that hockey growth where it's not happening, right?
And I think that there's a role for Mass Energize to facilitate that and to leverage all these volunteers and all this energy and all of this expertise that you've all developed to work together with the communities to do the hockey stick.
Okay,
but, yeah, I mean, I've been drowning in for those of us who are community first partnership who are participating in that, the challenge that we're facing is on the income eligible population and the inability for the service providers to meet the needs of the most vulnerable in our communities. And there's a meeting on Wednesday afternoon looking at the income eligible population and looking at how Mass Save is serving that sector, and it's falling far short. The goals, if we're talking about 1 million heat pumps by 2030, right? Isn't that the number that we're all hearing about? The Mass Save goal for income eligible households is 5,000 heat pumps by 2024. That's it. And the system is not set up and is not providing and is not, and so we're pushing, but to those of you who can listen in Wednesday afternoon to this EEAC meeting and hear how they're addressing this issue. But I mean, sorry, I'm kind of on I'm just hoping that the Healy administration ramps up and addresses this shortfall, because we are nowhere near what we need to be doing.
Martha, can you put in the chat a link to the EAC meeting?
I can.
Would be great. And the other thing I would just ask you is, we have the ability to blast out words to 20 communities. So if you see sort of an advocacy opportunity with the state, or where you need the voices of a lot of communities, we can help with that, because it's your actual job.
Right.
You're in a bunch of meetings that we're not in all the time. So we would ask for your collaboration on that.
Yep.
All right, I know we have some updates that Kat needs to give at the end, so I want to save 5 minutes for that. Any other, we're taking notes and kind of thinking about what we can do. Other comments? I think we have time for at least one more comment. Oh, Kat says, what am I updating on? I thought, sorry guys, do we have some updates we did want to share at the end? Was it Brad on some software things, or we're not? No, we don't have any. Brad has to unmute.
Not at the moment. I did
Not
want
at
to make a comment about coaching. And I think we had a meeting about it maybe a year ago or more. I think one of the best models on coaching, which is citizen coaching that could transition towards paid coaching, is that Newton Energy Coach site. And I want to revisit that as what I think is a good model for sustainability coaches.
I just would ask maybe Marcia, do you think the Newton software is working well on the Ask a Coach a Question site? Do you have any visibility on that?
I think she's gone.
She left? Okay. All right. So I think I think Nathan's taking really good notes, but I am
I want to respond to Martha Grover's comment about managing coaches, because as soon as you have more than a few, a handful of coaches in a community, we don't really have tools to manage them. And by manage, I mean, you have a stream of incoming requests. You have to know, which individual coaches are available to take on new requests. And you'd really like to track the progress of these coaching engagements. For heat pumps, at least they can run over 6 months or a year. The life cycle for each coaching engagement can be quite long, and without tracking software and then follow up. So there is I think a need that goes beyond individual communities to have some platform to manage the coaching, sort of a CRM or help desk type software that is intended for that purpose.
okay. All right, we're definitely gonna do some thinking on coaching. We're definitely gonna do some share the slides. We're definitely gonna do a monthly events coming up that we can all, share to each other. We're gonna do updates on the actions so you can at least plunk some of this info into what is on your website. And I think we should do some sharing on any social media postings we're doing about this so other communities can use them. Kat is reminding me, if we do stuff in Canva, we can do it in a way where we can easily swap out the name of one town for another town. So we can work on that. Martha's post the EAC meeting. Martha, at that meeting, is it value people just to listen, or is there there's an opportunity for comment period?
They're only offering 20 minutes of comments.
Okay.
Yeah, I think people just need to get up to speed on where the low income providers say that we are. The meeting is 1 to 4 in the afternoon. The public comment is just in the first 20 minutes.
That might be something though, but also the EDC can take comment. People can draft in email and send it to them. So if
so written comments are welcome.
Yep.
And the instructions are in the agenda on how to submit them.
Okay, and hopefully Nathan or Amy, someone can grab this. We can put it in our follow-up how to do that. I've gotten a comment from Debbie who wants to raise a question unrelated to what we've been talking about tonight for collective wisdom. So any parting additional, look, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So there's a lot of, there's a lot of new sneakers. I'm going to torture this analogy. There are a lot of new fancy sneakers we can put on. They're going to make us run faster. We just got to figure out how to train up to run as fast as we can run. So I think this is the beginning of our discussions on this. And I think we should be doing some things collectively. It's also wackadoodle to me that, Framingham doing its own thing and not collaborating with Natick at all or Wayland. And we shouldn't all be inventing social media posting or coaching training. That's really crazy. So we got to figure out how to help each other more. And we'd like to be in that niche and help with that. And I think Nathan and our team's gonna have to think about that. So we certainly, as you ponder this meeting and have other thoughts, please send them to us. And let's start to all use the Slack channel. Ellen, we will train you in office hours on that. All right, any other thoughts on this before I before I invite Debbie to pose her additional question to everybody? Okay, I will just note that people can note in the chat, Michael Lesser put something in about the Rewiring America mod income, get a range of upfront discounts can be as high, over $100,000. I would encourage everyone to play around with the Rewiring America tool. I found it very helpful to give you a sense of what's possible. That'd be great. All right, Debbie.
Thanks, Ellen. We have a couple people in our town that are interested in promoting switching to electric school buses. I feel like when there's energy behind a particular campaign among volunteers, you should just go with it, and help them to talk to the right people and get the ball rolling in terms of the conversation happening in our town. If there's anybody here who knows or is working on or has any information about that, can you get in touch with me? I'll put my email in the chat. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what you know, sort of crowdsourcing here. Thank you.
Great. I think a bunch of communities are doing that, and a bunch probably applied for the EPA money. Did anyone on this call get any of the EPA money for school buses? It was pretty focused on EJ communities, I know. We applied, didn't get it for our bus. I think there'll be more resources. So, all right, Debbie will put her email in and people can be in touch. Just by a show of hands, which communities are actively talking about electric school buses? All right, so you can get a sense of that, Debbie, just by looking at the hands.
Sorry.
So it's Acton, Wayland, Harvard have raised their hands that they're actively looking at school buses. Okay. And you're muted. Debbie, you're muted.
Thanks. I've been reading articles about it. If you Google it online, there's lots going on, and particularly there are Massachusetts companies involved.
Okay. Amy, can I turn it back to you? Because I don't know what our final
wrap up. So have promised a couple of things. We have a slide deck that everyone will have access to. We have template updates. Those are coming. We have a table with the Inflation Reduction Act incentives and the Mass Save or Massachusetts programs. The table really, I'll just quickly mention, is for people who like spreadsheets. It's more complicated than what I put on the slides. So that's just a note of warning for anyone. I love the idea. So we got some great ideas. Copying events. Some of the people were talking about copying events, sharing events. That's kind of a preview of coming attractions. One of the things that Mass Energize is working on in terms of software updates is making it easier for communities to share events and to know about one another's events. So we're not quite there yet, but stay tuned. So all these follow-up things, we will put them in an actual email along with an invite for all of you to Slack for that channel and any others you'd like to join. And we will get the email out, hopefully, definitely within a week, hopefully within this week.
Okay, any other final announcements from you can see in the chat a bunch of people have school bus contracts that's making it challenging. So I think there can be a fruitful discussion amongst those people sort of offline. Any other parting thoughts? We're now actually 6 minutes early, but we can go with that. You guys can eat your late dinners. We will do an office hours on how to use Slack. Stay tuned for that. That honestly, I know people have been resistant to it. I would just urge you to try it. You do have to kind of look at it, but it's the easiest way to pose a question to a lot of people and get a response and a discussion thread going on a very narrow topic. So it really is a terrific tool. So we hope people will lean into Slack on new technology side of things. Anything else, Nathan, from you on our end? I think we've.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Great. I think we will say goodnight, and we will all say a huge thank you to Amy, who got a big headache putting this all together, and we're very grateful. There are lots more webinars on this, so if you see one and a good slide deck, send it over to us. I think we did this one for you. This was not intended for residents, so this is for you. Like, it's input, it's the ingredients for your cake. Go make your cake and then tell us how we can also make the same cake.